My name is Marina Torres. I'm 33, and right now I'm standing in the middle of a prestigious winery in Napa Valley, pretending I don't hear my mother-in-law say, "Oh, you brought that bottle again," like she's commenting on some cheap corner store wine. She's not looking at the label. I'm a structural engineer. I've spent the last decade designing complex foundations for skyscrapers and earthquake-resistant buildings across the West Coast. But to the Torres family, especially Vivian, my mother-in-law, I've always just been Oliver's practical wife who does something with construction or buildings. They never really asked what I do. They just assume it's nothing sophisticated. I'm used to being overlooked at these family wine weekends. Every summer they gather at this exact winery, an elegant estate nestled between rolling hills and vineyards, all exposed beam architecture and tasting rooms that whisper of inherited wealth. And I show up, smile politely, and try not to take it personally when no one remembers I'm allergic to sulfites, or that I already handled the dinner reservation, or that I exist. But this year's different. Because this year I'm not just another guest. I'm the reason the membership policies changed. I'm the one who approved the new tasting menu. I'm the person who decided to end the Torres family's complimentary private cellar access. I own the place. But nobody knows that yet. Let me back up a second. Oliver and I have been married almost 9 years. He's an investment banking analyst, sharp, ambitious, genuinely caring in his own way. But he never quite found the backbone to stand up to his family. Not when they asked me to help serve the appetizers, even though none of the other spouses were expected to. Not when they called me practical but unrefined. Not even when Vivian introduced me to her art world friends as our Oliver's wife from, one of those technical schools. It burned, especially because I'd worked my ass off to earn my MIT degree, paid off my student loans through consulting work, and started building my real estate portfolio while they were off at gallery openings or posting their wine collections on social media. Still, I stayed quiet, kept calculating. I never tried to impress anyone. I just observed, listened, invested. 6 years ago, I started acquiring commercial properties through a company I structured discreetly. Most of it was strategic, but when this winery came up for sale last year, their beloved winery, I didn't even hesitate. It was expensive. I leveraged most of my portfolio to make it happen, but I knew the numbers worked. And honestly, part of me just wanted to own something that mattered to them, something they thought was beyond my reach. Now I'm standing here at the wine tasting dinner, wearing my simple black dress while everyone else is draped in designer labels. They're swirling glasses and discussing their latest art acquisitions. Preston just asked if I could help carry some bottles from the storage room because I guess I looked like I was going that direction. I wasn't, but I went anyway because I don't need to make waves. Not yet. Tomorrow night, the winery manager will announce that the estate has a new majority owner. And when they ask who, he'll point to me. The look on Vivian's face? Worth every damn dollar. The night after that wine tasting dinner, I sat alone on the terrace of our suite, watching the vineyard lights twinkle in the darkness. Everyone else had gone down to the private cellar, laughing, swirling vintage bottles, discussing terroir like something out of a pretentious wine documentary. I could hear them from here, but I wasn't part of it. Not really. I never had been. From the moment I married Oliver, it was like I had stepped into a world where my presence made people subtly uncomfortable. Not in an openly hostile way, no, that would have been easier to confront. It was worse, the polite exclusion, the small ways they reminded me I didn't quite belong. His mother Vivian never said anything directly offensive. She never had to. It was in her tone when she asked about my work, oh, how functional. In the way she'd pause meaningfully when I mentioned structural calculations. Or how she once murmured to Oliver, just loud enough for me to overhear, "She's competent, but she lacks cultural refinement, doesn't she?" Oliver never challenged her. Never even defended my intelligence. He'd just touch my arm and say, "She means well." That was his go-to response. When we first got married, I tried. God, I tried. I hosted holiday gatherings, curated wine selections for family events, offered to help plan their cultural outings. But nothing was ever sophisticated enough. One year, I spent months organizing Gregory's art gallery retirement celebration, secured the venue, designed the programs, coordinated with collectors. At the actual event, Celeste stood up to give a speech and thanked everyone who contributed, then named every family member, their partners, and even the gallery assistant by name. Not me. Oliver noticed. He leaned over, kissed my temple, whispered, "You know you handled everything." But he didn't correct the record publicly. That's how it always was. The week before our 3rd anniversary, his sister Sophia pulled me aside after a museum opening and said, "You know, it's remarkable you've lasted this long. Most people who marry into this family just sort of drift away." She smiled like she was offering encouragement. I smiled back, and that night I stood in the shower letting the water run hot enough to steam the mirrors so Oliver wouldn't see my tears. At some point, I stopped trying to fit in. I focused on my projects, focused on building something I could actually command. That's when I started acquiring properties, methodically, strategically. I worked late into the night, declined social invitations, drove the same reliable car for 8 years. They all assumed it was because I was financially constrained. They didn't realize I was constructing an empire. And then last summer, we were here, this exact same winery, and something crystallized. Gregory made a comment at dinner about me being surprisingly analytical for someone without proper breeding. Everyone chuckled knowingly. Even Oliver. And I just sat there, smiling while my jaw muscles locked so tight I needed ibuprofen for days. Later that night, I heard Vivian on a call through the thin walls of the adjoining suite. I don't know who she was speaking to, but I'll never forget what she said. "She's harmless. Useful, but she'll never have real sophistication. You can tell by how seriously she takes everything." That shattered something in me. Not because it was surprising, because it was definitive. That was the night I contacted a former colleague who'd moved into commercial real estate acquisitions. And 5 months later, I made my bid on this place. They don't know that. They don't know any of it. The transaction closed discreetly. I used a holding company, Valley Vista Estates LLC, to acquire majority ownership. I retained the existing management, upgraded the infrastructure systems, implemented new operational standards, all beneath their notice. But tomorrow night, the identity behind the company will be revealed at the winery's annual stakeholder meeting. And their expressions are going to be priceless, especially when they discover that Valley Vista has no plans to continue legacy family privileges anymore, that every bottle they've reserved for next season will be at full market price. And here's the irony, Oliver still doesn't know. Not because I'm concealing it deliberately, but because he's never inquired. Never questioned why I spend late evenings reviewing contracts, why I travel frequently for site inspections, why I've been in conferences with architects and property lawyers. I think fundamentally he just assumes I'm still handling some engineering projects. He's a decent man, but he's never truly seen me. And after 9 years, I've stopped trying to make him look. That's what tomorrow is really about. Not revenge, not even satisfaction. It's about finally emerging on my own terms. And if they can't handle the brightness? Their problem. The morning started like every other on this trip: Bellinis on the terrace, artisanal pastries arranged like museum pieces, and a table full of Torres family members talking over each other like they were competing for their own cultural podcast. I sat at the end of the long table, quietly stirring my espresso while Oliver's sister Celeste complained about how the service here has really declined since last season. The others joined in, building momentum like it was competitive sport. The sommelier had the audacity to question my wine knowledge, said Sophia, tossing her hair back like she was testifying before Congress. And don't get me started on the new security protocols, Gregory added. Some kid practically interrogated me about my membership status. I said nothing, just sipped. Then Celeste said something that made my fingers tighten around my cup handle. Honestly, I miss when this place had authentic family ownership. You could feel the personal touch. Now it's just another soulless investment group trying to appear sophisticated. Oliver nodded, completely oblivious. Yeah, I heard some LLC bought it out. No character anymore, just corporate efficiency. No character anymore, right? That soulless investment group had modernized the cellar climate control, enhanced staff compensation packages, replaced the outdated plumbing throughout the guest quarters, and installed a state-of-the-art filtration system the previous owners had neglected for decades. But sure, let's romanticize when the manager gave free tastings to wealthy families just for having the right last name. What really devastated me, though, was that Oliver didn't even pause. Didn't detect the irony. He hadn't once questioned why I'd been on conference calls all week, why I vanished every evening after dinner to inspect the grounds with architectural plans. It simply didn't register with him. It never registered with any of them that I might actually hold significance here. I thought that was the pinnacle of their obliviousness until dinner. That night, the family assembled in the private tasting room. Vivian had orchestrated it, naturally, and mandated the dress code, elegant but vineyard appropriate, whatever the hell that meant. I wore a charcoal wrap dress I had purchased during end-of-season sales last fall, paired with the same black pumps I'd worn to my MIT graduation. Vivian examined me like she was appraising a piece of furniture she might reject. We hadn't even reached the cheese course before the conversation circled back to winery management. I mean, who renovates the barrel room during harvest season? Celeste said. It's like they've never actually operated a vineyard before. Some tech entrepreneur probably acquired it as a weekend project, Oliver's brother Preston chimed in. Thinks owning a winery is like coding an algorithm. I'd love to speak with whoever's making decisions, offer them some genuine expertise. Oliver leaned over and whispered to me, maybe we should submit feedback. Could be constructive. I didn't even acknowledge him. I was too busy swallowing the fire rising in my throat. And then Vivian polished, smiling, masterfully condescending as always. Vivian raised her wine glass and declared, well, I just hope whoever purchased the estate understands that families like ours established its prestige. We're not merely patrons. We're the foundation of this place's cultural value. I stared at her, thunderstruck. Not just by the entitlement of it, but by the unwavering certainty, the way she spoke with such conviction, like the universe still orbited around her aesthetic judgments. I couldn't endure it anymore. I excused myself from the table and stepped outside into the crisp evening air. My hands were trembling, and not from the temperature. I stood by the stone balustrade overlooking the vineyards. Somewhere behind me, someone had started playing classical guitar in the tasting room, a melancholy melody that made my ribcage feel too small. I pulled out my phone and called James, the estate manager. He answered on the second ring. Hey, boss. You ready? I looked back through the window. They were chuckling about something. Probably me. Do it, I said. Announce the new ownership tonight, before the dessert course. Copy that, he said. You sure you don't want to be present? No, I whispered. Let them process it for a moment. I hung up and waited. Inside, I watched James approach the head of the room and delicately tap his glass. The room fell silent. I couldn't hear his words, but I didn't need to. I knew the announcement. As part of our ownership transition, we're honored to reveal that Valley Vista Estates LLC has recently acquired full control of the winery. And tonight, we'd like to recognize the owner, without whom none of this would be possible. I stepped back inside just in time to hear the conclusion, Ms. Marina Torres. The silence was absolute. I walked in slowly, heels clicking against the polished stone floor. Every head turned. Celeste dropped her fork with a sharp clatter. Sophia's mouth literally fell open. Vivian's wine glass tilted sideways and spilled burgundy across the white linen tablecloth, but she didn't even register it. Oliver just stared at me like he'd never seen me before in his life. I looked directly at him. You wanted to submit feedback, Oliver? I said calmly. I'd be happy to forward it to myself. You ever see a whole table of people freeze like they've just been caught gossiping about their boss, only to realize their boss was sitting 2 seats away the entire time? Multiply that by 10, add vintage wine, sprinkle and cultural superiority that was the tasting room after James announced my name. Gregory literally choked on his pear tart. Preston dropped his phone. I think someone whispered, "Wait, her," like I wasn't standing right there. And Oliver, he looked at me like he couldn't decide whether to be impressed, betrayed, or just mortified that he hadn't known. Honestly, I don't think he'd processed it by the time the evening ended. I didn't sit back down. I walked directly to the head of the table, Vivian's customary position, and picked up the microphone James had left behind. My hands were completely steady. I looked at each of them slowly, deliberately, and then I smiled. "Don't worry," I said. "You're all still welcome here. Just like everyone else now." Complete silence. No complimentary tastings. No priority reservations. No discounts for being a Torres. Not anymore. I handed the mic to the guitarist, turned, and walked out before anyone could recover enough to manage polite applause. I made it to the corridor before I finally breathed. That was the moment everything shifted. Something unlocked inside me, not from anger, but from liberation. For the first time in 9 years, I wasn't performing. I wasn't trying to belong. I wasn't diminishing myself to make anyone comfortable. And it felt absolutely magnificent. The next morning, I skipped the usual family breakfast. Let them wonder. Instead, I toured the property with James, notebook in hand, reviewing the new cellar expansion progress. Staff members passed me with respectful acknowledgments. Guests nodded and smiled. The winery felt vibrant in a way it never did when I was just Oliver's wife. Around noon, I received the first text from Celeste, "Hey, can we talk?" I didn't respond. 5 minutes later, a knock on my door. It was Oliver. He looked anxious, like a man about to request a promotion he knows he hasn't earned. "Marina," he began, "can we? I mean, are you all right?" I studied him for a moment. He wasn't a terrible person. That's what made it more complicated. "You never asked," I said simply. "Asked what?" "What I do. Why I work late. Where I go when I travel. You never asked." "I didn't think I needed to," he said, like that justified everything. Exactly. I didn't cry. I didn't raise my voice. I just let the silence stretch between us until he left. That evening, there was a small reception for longtime members, a tradition I'd considered canceling until I realized I didn't have to cancel it. I could transform it. So I did. The room was full of people in their designer finest, holding wine glasses and murmuring about the new owner like I wasn't about to enter. I waited until they were mid-toast before stepping to the front. "Good evening," I said into the mic. "Some of you already know me. Some of you thought you knew me." Polite chuckles. Uncomfortable glances. I clicked to the second slide on the screen behind me, an architectural rendering of the winery's upcoming expansion. "We'll be adding new tasting pavilions, an education center, and a public sculpture garden, all funded by a new initiative, the Torres Women's Foundation." Oliver's mother perked up at the sound of Torres, probably assuming it was some family heritage project. I turned and looked her directly in the eye. "It's named for my mother, Carmen Torres. She worked as a hotel housekeeper in Sacramento for 18 years, raised me alone, and taught me that dignity is earned, not inherited." Vivian's expression crumbled like aged parchment. And then came the revelation. I clicked to the final slide. Also, I added casually, "Starting next season, we'll be restructuring all existing membership agreements, including private cellar spaces currently held under legacy family arrangements." I didn't need to elaborate. They understood. Gregory owned 2 of those spaces, secured at 1990s rates. Celeste had one under her husband's name. Sophia's parents had an entire wing they'd been subletting for profit. And now I controlled every single renewal. I thanked them for attending, stepped off the platform, and walked directly past them all. Preston tried to intercept me. "Marina, wait, can we discuss this?" "Certainly," I said, pausing. "You can schedule an appointment through estate management." just like everyone else. Now, 3 days after the reception, I sat alone on the vineyard terrace at sunrise, espresso in hand, watching the morning mist. It was peaceful, still, like it had been holding its breath, just like I had for years, and was finally exhaling. But the winery wasn't peaceful. Not anymore. By noon the next day, my inbox was a war zone. Gregory had emailed a cordial inquiry about extending his legacy arrangement twice. Celeste had sent me a voice message with the word misunderstanding used 6 separate times. And Vivian left a voicemail I've listened to just once, because her voice sounded like it was being strained through a smile sharp enough to cut crystal. Marina, darling, I think this has all become rather theatrical, don't you? We're family. We can arrange something more suitable, woman to woman, right? The same woman who once suggested at Christmas that I might benefit from an etiquette course since technical people often lack social polish. But I wasn't furious anymore. I was methodical. By the end of the week, I had my legal team examine every membership agreement, including the unauthorized subletting Celeste had been conducting quietly for years. She'd earned over $50,000 renting her private family cellar during peak seasons and never declared a cent of it. We didn't pursue the money. We pursued the tax documentation. 2 weeks later, she received a formal audit notice from the state. I didn't say a word, just forwarded her the contact information for an excellent tax attorney. Gregory wasn't far behind. His cellar lease had long expired, and he'd been using informal agreements to maintain it. I didn't terminate it immediately. I gave him 30 days to clear out and transferred the space to a non-profit that serves wounded veterans and their families. They were settled in by early July. And Vivian? Oh, Vivian received her comeuppance too. She arrived unannounced one afternoon, wearing her pearls like armor, attempting to have a private conversation in my office. I let her speak for 5 minutes about maintaining dignity, about what the art community will think, about how this reflects on Oliver. When she paused, expecting me to nod or show sympathy, I simply opened my desk drawer and handed her the envelope I'd prepared days earlier. Inside, photographs, emails, and notarized statements from 3 former staff members she'd mistreated over the years: servers, guides, assistants. She called one of them a pretentious little nobody in writing. I'd quietly resolved all 3 cases after acquiring the property and issued formal apologies. But now, with her standing before me, I told her I'd drafted a statement for the press if she ever attempted to portray herself as a victim publicly. I made it clear this wasn't about intimidation. It was about accountability. She left trembling. And Oliver? He never challenged me. Not once. After the revelation, he unraveled, questioning everything, not just me, but himself. What he overlooked. What he failed to notice. We had long, difficult conversations in the weeks that followed. There were tears, silences, remorse. In the end, I told him something I hadn't even fully understood until I spoke it aloud. I didn't marry into this family seeking acceptance. I stayed because I hoped one day you'd truly see me, not just stand beside me, but see me. Now I don't need that anymore. Because I see myself, and that's sufficient. He moved out quietly a month later. We're not adversaries, but we're no longer a team. And that somehow ached less than I expected it would, because I've reclaimed everything they tried to diminish in me. The quiet woman who smiled and brought the wine? She owns the vineyard now. The truth is, sometimes you don't receive closure in the form of an apology. You get it in the form of power, quiet, earned, undeniable power. And once you possess it, real self-constructed inner strength, no one can strip it away. If you've ever been underestimated, marginalized, or made to feel insignificant in your own narrative, I'd love to hear how you changed the game. Share your story in the comments. Who knows? Someone out there might need to read it. And if this story resonated with you, you know where the subscribe button is. I've got more stories to tell.